You're with the Economic Times, and I'm Ashutosh Sinha. Cloud. That is the buzzword today as you step into any meeting with a member of a board of a company. It is the repository of data on the cloud that is making companies agile, and the way that they use the very important part. Use of the data to understand the needs of business and to add that extra dash of intelligence and understanding. So let's understand some of the issues around cloud. The speed at which services can be accessed, some of the issues about how data can be used, privacy, security, there are too many of them to be spoken about. Ravi Chhabria, Managing Director at NetApp, joins us to talk about some of these issues and more as well. He's been a veteran with the company and seen the rise of the cloud as a business enabler as well. Good morning, Ravi. What a time to be in the cloud business. Just a perfect storm that's been brewing for a while, you'd say?
So good morning, Ashutosh, and many thanks for having us here and kind of allowing us to express a point of view on a topic that is front and center in the industry. It's been in development actually for almost a decade, but as you say, it looks like everything's kind of culminating in the moments that we are sitting in. There's a number of reasons for that if you look at it. The shift to cloud is something that's actually started almost 2 decades ago, but it started on the simpler things, right? It came in from a perspective of cost optimization, and it came in simpler. Now I think we are left with some of the more difficult problems. And what I think you're seeing in the last 2 to 3 years in the crux or in the midst of a pandemic that challenged the very existence of businesses, we've seen that businesses that were able to really thrive in that context of the cloud are standing out and are kind of accelerating to a point where that there's a wake that's been creating, other companies are following through too. So there's a monumental kind of a shift towards cloud. It's been building up slowly, but the momentum now is almost hitting a crescendo and there's no signs of stopping. So it's a very, very exciting time for sure.
Of course, it looks wonderful. So companies do have, sometimes it does feel too much of data.
Yes.
And sometimes it's way too much as well.
Correct.
So how do you classify it so that the storage cost of, is optimized and the performance of services, that the end users access and the businesses access, that is not compromised?
Correct. And so let me kind of put it a little bit in perspective. Some of these are not unique to the cloud, okay? And some of these are not even unique to the moment, but certain things have changed in a very dramatic way. We've gone from systems that were really good at transacting to systems that are now very good at even interaction. So look at this, the video from this show is going to be data somewhere in the cloud, going to be accessed from devices that you and I are not even aware exist, correct? That will grow twofold in the next year itself. So that's been the one difference. But this notion of what does it mean to get value out of data has been age-old. It's been age-old. So you have to be clear on a few things. You have to be able to optimize data, which comes to the question of how do you deal with massive amounts and kind of derive value from the bit that matters in this moment, while not losing the ability to maximize the value that you might get in another moment. So optimization of data, very important. Protection of data, exceptionally important. Security of data, also very important. Privacy, other governance aspects, right? Do you have data in country, out of country? All of these become exceptionally important. And our goal is to kind of, as an industry, to take the complexity out of it so businesses can take value from cloud. You don't want data to become the innovator. You want data to become the enabler, right? And so I think you're going to see that there's a lot of focus and a lot of success coming from companies that are able to help manage data in a manner that is seen as value as opposed to seen as a risk.
Okay. Okay, so interesting. Now, if large companies can do it, they can dice and splice the data. How can smaller companies do that, or relatively smaller companies? And what are some of those early steps they need to take so that when they grow to a certain size, they can ride the data and the cloud opportunities that exist at a bigger scale?
So very interesting point. So the basic premise, right, which was true, that if you and I were to open a business, and if we were to have done it 15 years ago, at some point in the midst of our business planning, we would be planning for what is the IT infrastructure going to look like. We'd see us getting distracted from whatever business we were running into the business of IT. We'd be starting to think about a data center. We'd be raising capital that was kind of building out infrastructure for something that is not core to our business, right? So what you've seen, it's proven now with, I think, innumerable unicorns, if you look at them globally also. People have built businesses at scale without building data centers. They've decided that that is not important, that the compute capability and the IT capability is easily consumed as a utility, as a service. Ashutosh, go back 100 years. People that built factories built them near rivers for a reason, because they had ready access to water. They generated their own electricity. Correct? So people have moved from data centers to saying, I don't need it. I'll give you some examples. We look at our startup accelerator programs in India. NetApp has one too, but you look at it across the industry. You have 23-year-olds who've never seen a data center, who are never going to see a data center. They're building up businesses in insurance, in healthcare, in so many other areas, built on AI, built on machine learning, built on very modern technologies, without worrying about infrastructure. So that's what cloud has enabled. Now, what you're seeing happening is this transition of legacy businesses coming into the cloud. The harder problems, things that were not designed for cloud, are now starting to come into cloud. So if you're small, if you're young, it's easy. If you're legacy, you've built up a lot of value in a data center, I think you need a little bit of help. And that's the kind of capability we've been building out also. Enable new business, transition existing business.
Since you referred to some of the traditional businesses, they have a certain way of working. So just for perspective, what are some of those best practices for hot and cold data that you'd recommend that enterprises follow? And keeping in mind that these could also be for legacy businesses.
For a last question, please.
I was just saying, what are some of those best practices that enterprises need to follow for the hot and cold data? Because you refer to multiple kinds of data.
Correct. And so let's also talk about how the management of that data has become simplified, and how the specialization of data focus in clouds has made it easy. So very real examples, you could pick any of our largest customers, and they're the top kind of businesses globally. And you'd see that at the core of their data centers, they have specialists. They have people that are really specialized in managing compute farms. There are people that are specialized in managing storage. To take the day of one of them, they'd come into the office at 8 o'clock in the morning. They'd look at these dashboards. They'd look at that plethora of data. They'd try and identify outliers. What's the top 2%? What's the top 3%? Why is the consumption high? Why am I running out of space? So is utilization high? And then there's a lot of insight and experience they bring to bear in that world. And then they optimize. Now, few things that have changed in the cloud world. You have systems that are self-optimizing. So the things that we built to modernize the data center are absolutely paying off dividends in the cloud, because the cloud user does not really have that data expertise, right? They've built out maybe a pharmaceutical pipeline, or they're doing some analytics on drug discovery. They're basically consuming storage, and they expect that as their storage consumption increases, it also increases. Secondly, they also feel that it needs to be cost optimized. So they're hoping there's something in the background figuring things are not being used. So at some point, there has to be introspection, insight. To put it in the context of our portfolio, we've got products like Cloud Insight, which tell you what's happening. Then you have products like Spot, which kind of go try optimize some of it. And I think that's the dominant theme. You explore the data, you kind of optimize the data, and you then make it all invisible in some sense to the end user.
Okay. So also the average user of a service or an app wants speed and security for his use. So what factors should enterprises consider when they look at companies helping them to achieve that?
And in the hope that every startup out there, somebody becomes a large business too, right?
Yeah.
So what you see happening in large businesses now, they are not just dominantly building out their own data centers or using their data centers. They're also using cloud, and they're not just using one cloud, they're using multiple clouds. In fact, this whole notion of hybrid multi-cloud, on-premise, data center based, in the cloud, hybrid in between, and multiples of them, right, is the dominant design point today in almost any business. And there's a large number of statistics around how much it has grown and how much it continues to grow, right? Look at traditional businesses. At best, if you look at our traditional business, which is the on-prem business, it's growing about 11% if you looked at certain stats in our most recent business releases that we did. You look at what's happening in cloud, it's growing 3x. What's more, if you look at the three dominant players in the cloud, each one of them is 10 times the size of what a legacy provider would be, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, there's a serious amount of momentum. Now, what's ending up happening is for the businesses that are going there, right? They want to manage all of this in an efficient way. They want it all to look seamless. That's where the value comes in. Now, the reason why did I bring up a startup? The startup of today, take a good example of many of these. You look at Netflix, you look at Uber, you look at almost any one of these no longer startups, giant businesses globally. They started off in the cloud. Then one day you wake up and you figure that if I owned this infrastructure, or if I had my own cloud, instead of using somebody else's cloud, I could probably recover 3 to 4% of profit almost instantly. And by the way, why? Because we have that scale when you get to a certain level of business where you might as well do it on your own. You have to be able to plan for that. And I think what technology's gotten to today, especially when we talk about our goals and our accomplishments at NetApp, we make that transition seamless. You take an on-prem workload, you could burst it into the cloud. You could do something in the cloud, you could bring it back on-prem. You could do it for cost optimization reason. You could decide because, hey, one of these hyperscalers has an amazingly new, innovative machine learning platform. Right. And for this data set, I want to go there, right? You can do a lot of these things.
Okay. So one of those concerns also for people is security. So how are companies trying to address that worry regarding security of their data on the public or even in the hybrid cloud?
Yeah. So here, Ashutosh, I'm just, there's times you look back at careers over long spans and you say, man, how has the world changed, right? So in the area of security, right, if you've ever walked into a traditional data center, it used to be about locks and keys, and guards and guns, right? Now it's turned into software and services, right? The basic issues are still the same. Who am I letting in the door? It's around identity, around enabling access. It's around continuously monitoring. It's around security such that you are able to detect something and take action. So what's ended up happening is that traditional, when I use the word traditional, when I use the word legacy, remember this, NetApp's been in business almost 30 years, right? What I mean by that is dominance, right? You've done something for 3 decades. You pretty much know what you're doing. You've built deep expertise. What's changing for us? What used to be very core is now turned into service. Okay, as you find ourselves living in hyper multi-cloud, look at it. At some point, I don't know if you're aware, but if you look at any of the major hypercloud providers, there is an offering in there that you may not know is NetApp, but it's NetApp. Now, what does that mean? The software that runs in a data center called ONTAP is the same software that you would be using if you're in any of those three major cloud providers, and if you were running an application of significance. Correct? So the notion is you're running these things in 4 different ways. They're all looking seamless. You're not acquiring a new skill. And NetApp in itself is adapting, because things that we used to build out in your data center, now we are building out in these clouds too. Something that can look at your secondary storage tier and say, can I optimize it? Can I extract some value out of it? And so it's all turning into software. Security is turning into software. How the value you derive out of it is software. But the kind of governance and the reporting that you want is all also turning into software, and software defined as a service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, this exclusive partnership with Amazon is making headlines around the world. What more could it mean as services for the enterprise customers of NetApp in India?
So at its core, I think we've pulled off something that makes it exceptionally simple for our consumers, right? We have pulled it off. So firstly, let's be clear on a few things. That's a relationship that's about 9 years old. That's an integration that took about 3 years, right? It's culminated today in a manner that allows us to reach customers that we don't even know. Customers that we would otherwise not have reached. Look at Amazon's scale. Amazon, in terms of its cloud-based business, is about 3 to 4 times bigger every quarter than what NetApp is in a year. And they have 2 very formidable competitors also, more actually, if you look at it, right? So what we've done is created an opportunity that literally spans every single choice a business, small or large, new or legacy, may choose to want to engage in. Okay. And we've done it not because we've put in 10 times the effort. We've taken that same effort, that same operating system for storage, and we've made it ubiquitous. Now, that is very unique. I'll say that there is not anybody that can tell you that they have this intermediary layer to manage data, to protect data, to secure data that remains constant as you move from one cloud to another to a third, that actually facilitates the movement from one cloud to another cloud to a third, that allows you to be born in the cloud and move back into the data center, or be in the data center and burst into the cloud. Therein comes the uniqueness, right? And the reason I talked to you about 3 years in development, 9 years of relationship, it's a big moat, right? And frankly, you know, others could put in a 9-year relationship and a 3-year development effort. You also have to bring in 3 years of dominance and expertise, or 30 years of dominance and expertise, right? 3 decades worth of that. I think that's where the value is.
So that's the Amazon partnership around the globe. But Ravi, on the India market, what's happening in the public cloud space?
More or less, Ashutosh, what's happening globally. It's a pretty, you know, there used to be a time we used to think of the India market or the India IT sector lagging the globe. It's no longer the case. I'll give you a couple of examples. Most of the world's data centers are now running in India. Okay, if you look at what we used to consider to be Indian tech companies, they are running the world's data centers, wherever they are in the world. So it's kind of become very homogenized. What we've been able to do with AWS FSx for ONTAP is replicate in India and replicate in other global locations at Amazon what we've been able to do with Microsoft Azure and others. It's make ubiquitous storage on tap across the globe.
Okay, so the key message: centralize the complexity, distribute the ease. also, that's the larger picture. That is the central thought I'd like to believe as you look to expand the services in the country. Thank you so much, Ravi, for being with us and explaining some of the, I wouldn't call it myths, but the opportunities around the cloud business and its periphery. Thank you indeed.
Thank you.